Coming up on Lawmakers, House Speaker Glen Richardson throws down the gauntlet on budget negotiations, and Senate President Pro-Tem Eric Johnson responds. And several groups join forces as the Working Families Agenda to protest this session's legislative priorities. And the House and Senate agree on controversial immigration legislation. That bill is now headed to Governor Perdue. Those stories and more are coming up next.
This is Lawmakers, your source for all the news from under the Gold Dome. Here are your anchors, Gerald Bryant and Nwandi Lawson.
Good evening, everyone. Also on Lawmakers tonight, the Senate votes to allow the display of historical documents in local government buildings. That includes the 10 Commandments.
And the House approves a measure that would allow the state to seize lottery winnings of deadbeat parents. But first, our lead story tonight, budget negotiations reach a boiling point. As one of the first orders of business this morning, House Speaker Glen Richardson went to the well to rail against stalled budget talks with the Senate. Richardson said the Senate refused to discuss budget figures, preferring to focus on changes to budget processes for the Administrative Office of the Courts and the Department of Education.
It would be like the judicial branch coming over here and looking at us and saying, why do y'all have a House budget office and a Senate budget office? Y'all don't need those. Y'all just pull them into one and take half the money. Y'all are wasting taxpayer dollars. If the judicial branch of government tried to tell the legislative branch of government that we were wasting money, spending in that fashion, we would scream loud and long. If what they wanted to do was us divide up everything into programs and put the money into the programs so we could make sure they went to the programs, that'd be great. But they're doing the opposite of that in education. They want to move the money into these programs and give flexibility to the superintendent to spend in those programs. And I don't agree with that either. I think we need to focus on the budget. And until I see some movement on the budget, except for a couple items, agrees, disagrees, and Conference Committee reports, I'm not going to be taking up any more Senate bills. I'm not going to call them. I hope you'll support me in that decision and understand. I think it's our job to do. Thank you.
Senate President Pro-Tem Eric Johnson was quick to respond to the Speaker's statement. Johnson defended the Senate's right to be a full partner in budget negotiations and talked about what he termed House arrogance.
I don't know how many of you just witnessed the Speaker of the House go to the well and basically claim that there was a unicameral legislature in this building and the Senate wasn't part of it. There is an arrogance across the aisle that believes the Senate should not have a seat at the table. The Speaker had the gall to say that his biggest mistake was allowing the Senate to have its own budget office. Allowing us to have our own budget office. We are down to hours from maybe getting out of here without a budget. We can do it if we want to. But if we have to sacrifice the Senate's seat at the table, then we shouldn't do it, and we should come back up here in a special session. Nobody wants to do that.
And at this hour, the House and Senate remain at an impasse over the 2007 budget. The budget is the one piece of legislation that the General Assembly is required to produce each year. The $18 billion bill is vital to the adjournment of the session on Thursday. Lawmaker Jesse Freeman now joins us live from the Capitol with more. Jesse.
Well, Nwandi, as we just saw today, began with Republican leaders in both chambers lashing out at their companions across the hall for causing the stall on the budget. The only public meeting the conferees have held today was a brief one just before noon. House and Senate conferees met at 11:30 a.m. and exchanged what each side claimed was a balanced budget proposal. They agreed to meet again at 2, but that was delayed until 3, then 4, then 5, and so on. In a terse response to the budget impasse, Senate President Pro-Tem Eric Johnson gave a clue to the divergence.
There is no program in the Department of Education just geared towards high school dropouts. It's probably our biggest issue in education. And the best thing we could do to improve scores in the state of Georgia is reduce the high school dropout. The House says no.
final day of the legislative session has been set for this Thursday, March the 30th. If the chambers do not agree on a budget by midnight of that day, there could be a special session. Reporting live, I'm Jesse Freeman for Lawmakers.
In other news, the Working Families Agenda Legislative Caucus and several organizations representing working Georgians rallied on the front steps of the Capitol today to address issues they believe Governor Perdue and the General Assembly have not handled properly. Lawmakers' David Zelski joins us live from the House chamber with that story. David.
Well, Gerald, several speakers took the podium today to express their disapproval with several legislative decisions made this year dealing with natural gas, employment, and health care. Representative Al Williams led the rally. There was singing in the rain, but frustration in the air.
You are the workers that keep Georgia together.
That's right.
You are the professionals that make things happen.
Right.
Above all, you're Georgians.
Yeah.
You're Georgians and you're voting Georgians.
There you go.
And you have a right to have a say in your government.
Yeah.
There were employees from General Motors, Brown & Williamson, and other workers with both blue and white-collar jobs sharing their opinions.
2 years ago, we had 5 suicides at our plant. One of them was a good friend of mine. And I've dedicated myself to try to do whatever it took to try to help those people losing their jobs. We had a bill here, House Bill 208. All it was going to do was take the state tax off our severance package. It wasn't that much money. But we were lied to last year, lied to this year. It never come out of committee, and we were promised it was coming.
The Atlanta Gas Light Company should operate in the manner of all corporations and finance their own projects with their own resources.
Yeah.
Why should Georgians bear the cost of a measure that would benefit them but fatten the pockets of greedy corporations?
Yeah.
As you've heard already, they've announced closures, and plant closures not only of us, but the Ford plants also, and what kind of support we've got from our state and local governments on this. We haven't received anything, except if your name is Kia, you get all the help that you want.
They have done nothing for working Georgians that I've seen in the last 2 years.
Now, the speakers today also discussed the rising cost of health care for state employees and the need to re-regulate the natural gas market. Reporting live from the House chamber, I'm David Zelski for Lawmakers.
The House today gave final passage to a sweeping immigration reform measure. Gone from Senate Bill 529 when it emerged from conference committee was a House provision to charge a 5% fee for overseas money transfers made by illegal immigrants. The current bill restricts access to public health care and benefits for adults who are in the country illegally and requires employers to withhold 6% of the salaries of those who cannot provide a taxpayer ID number. Representative John Lunsford explained that measure.
What we've done is we've used the same threshold limit that currently mirrors Georgia law at the 1099 level of $600 or more within a calendar year. And what we've stated here is that withholding agents shall be required to pull 6% of the gross funds as backup withholding. Now, what we're actually pulling that information from is the IRS regulation 3406A1, which states that requires that a taxpayer must back up withhold after receiving notification from an Internal Revenue Service that a payee's TIN is incorrect or if they fail to furnish a taxpayer identification number, and that's current federal law.
The House agreed to the conference committee report by a vote of 119 to 49. The measure now requires the governor's approval.
Meanwhile, the Senate today took a House bill that would have added an additional fee on money illegal immigrants wire to their home countries and turned it into a title pawn bill. Senator Bill Hamrick said that would give the House another chance to protect consumers from title lenders.
House Bill 1238, when it came to us in Senate banking, was the Illegal Immigration Fee Act. We held off and in an effort to pass some consumer protections for consumers in the title pawn industry, we changed this legislation and stripped all of the language dealing with the illegal immigration fee because the House amended our bill and placed that in our bill. So we went with this legislation to give the House a third chance to pass some consumer protections for those who take out loans from title lenders.
The substitute to House Bill 1238 passed 47 to 4 and returns to the House.
The Senate has passed a bill this evening that would allow local government buildings to display the 10 Commandments. The religious text would have to be displayed alongside the Declaration of Independence and 8 other documents that sponsors of the bill say shaped our state's government. Lawmakers Jesse Freeman joins us live from the Capitol with more on that. Jesse.
Well, this bill was debated for hours before it passed out of the House, but after concerns about constitutionality, it was amended in the Senate committee, and a requirement that the state attorney general defend any local government sued for posting the commandments was removed. To many opponents, that took the teeth out of the bill, and it passed the Senate with no debate. Ever since the 10 Commandments hung in the Barrow County Courthouse and the county lost a lawsuit, Republicans in the House have pushed a bill allowing courthouses to display the biblical text. House Bill 941 would hang the commandments along with other historical documents. The bill passed the House, but soon after, a constitutional lawyer wrote a letter to Speaker Richardson saying the law was unconstitutional.
We changed the provision about the state defending the challenges on that. That was something that the Attorney General had a concern about.
Representative Benton says the substitute bill will hold up in court. Senator Ralph Hudgens carries the bill on the Senate floor.
I would like to move this forward. If there's a challenge to it, so be it.
House Bill 941 passes the Senate 43-4. Now, I visited Barrow County in January, and the chairman of the county commission there said that the cost of fighting the lawsuit that was brought by the American Civil Liberties Union was the biggest reason they would not try to post the commandments again. He said that if the state AG's office would foot the bill, the county might fight again. That provision, however, was not in the final version of House Bill 941. Reporting live, I'm Jesse Freeman for Lawmakers.
The House voted today to withhold lottery winnings from parents who failed to pay child support. Representative Edward Lindsey explained Senate Bill 419.
The way the law works right now with the Georgia lottery and with other state agencies that have liens, such as tax liens, is that any state agency can file with the Georgia lottery a notice of a tax lien that it has on a particular individual. And if that individual collects from the Georgia lottery on a prize of greater than $5,000, the lien can be levied against that particular prize. Georgia Child Support Recovery Unit wants to basically lower that threshold in order for it to be able to recover money for child support owed throughout the state to $2,500.
If he or she gets that ticket and gives it to a family member, that means that everything that we've done on this legislation has really gone for naught.
That is possible. That's another reason why it's set at $5,000 and $2,500. You're less likely to have somebody turn the ticket over to a third party if the prize is larger. That's one reason why they don't go lower.
Senate Bill 419 passed the House by a vote of 160-1. It now goes to Governor Perdue for his signature.
The House, a compromise in the House on legislation to crack down on sexual predators passed today. The Conference Committee on House Bill 1059 agreed to make the age difference 4 years in the Romeo and Juliet clause to prevent dating teens from being charged. The compromise also expands the areas that may be frequented by convicted sex offenders.
We have changed the definitions of living, working, and loitering. One of the areas we worked on is to make sure that offenders cannot live or loiter within 1,000 feet of where minors congregate. However, predators, those most serious offenders, cannot live, loiter, or work within 1,000 feet of an area where minors congregate, but neither may work in a church, school, day, or daycare facility within 1,000 feet. So it's a little more lenient for those that are less offensive who have been convicted of lower offenses.
The House agreed to the Conference Committee report by a vote of 140-13. The Senate has not yet considered the report.
The Senate today passed its version of a House bill that could assist in finding lost Alzheimer's patients. Senator Chip Rogers explains.
And it is patterned after a fantastic system that is working inside the city of Atlanta right now with respect to helping find and locate senior citizens who are suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's who have gone missing. This would allow us to begin using the alert system to locate those people. To my knowledge, there's been, after making a couple minor changes, no opposition to this bill. You will also find an amendment on your desk which would create Kimberly's call, and this would be in a very rare instance that we have a person who is suspected of committing the crime of murder or rape, and that person is on the loose, and law enforcement personnel believe that suspect is a serious threat to the public. We could use the notification system at that time.
The Mattie's Call Act, the Senate substitute to House Bill 728, passed with the Senate amendment. The final vote was 51-0, and it heads back to the House.
Recalling the Fulton County courthouse shooting 1 year ago, the House today agreed to give county sheriffs jurisdiction over courthouse security. Representative David Ralston explained that Senate Bill 462 has the backing of the state sheriff's departments and county commissioners, but some House members balked at the plan.
It does add to the duties of a sheriff to prepare and develop a plan for courthouse security. Once that is done, that is then submitted to the Chief Superior Court judge in each circuit for review. And the judge has the power to modify or make other changes during the review process. And then the plan itself, and this was a concern to the governing authorities about the expense of this and having an official outside the revenue and budgeting process be in charge of this. But the plan itself then must come from the sheriff's budget.
The judges and the sheriffs and the county commissioners have already been enhancing the security. But what you're doing is you're wading into that balance of power between your county commissioners, your sheriffs, and your judges. And the bottom line is the folks that's going to lose is your county commissioners. And this is going to end up being an unfunded mandate any way you figure it.
The House passed Senate Bill 462, 129-32. Changes made in committee send that measure back to the Senate.
The Senate today passed its version of a House bill that would benefit African-American police officers who some 30 years ago were denied access to police officers' retirement. Senate President Pro-Tem Eric Johnson said Representative Tyrone Brooks had been working on the passage of the bill for at least 6 years.
The original bill that came over here would have opened it up for everybody in the early 70s, and I can tell you the dates if you're interested. But the chairman of the Retirement Committee worked with Representative Brooks, worked with Representative Towton to narrow this down to deal only with those officers who tried to join and were denied for reasons of bias or prejudice, and they will have to sign an affidavit that they were a victim of racism. And then we're going to open up 6 months for an opportunity for people, everybody who wants to come in and claim they have a right to this access back into the retirement fund. And then after that window is closed, we will come back next year and know the amount and put it in the budget by law.
House Bill 101 passed by substitute. The vote was 50-0. The bill returns to the House.
Speed detection devices may soon be ticketing people who speed in school zones during school hours. However, an amendment to House Bill 294 from Senators Preston Smith and John Wiles changed where the money from these tickets will go. They added that the cameras are inaccurate and are only about making money for local governments.
There's an amendment out there that kind of calls the bluff. The amendment that I suggest to you says, okay, if you're really about safety, let's take all the money you make from that camera and let's send it to the Brain and Spinal Injury Trust Fund.
They would still get to place these cameras where they want to. They would still get to find the speeders, and that money would go to a statutorily created fund for the catastrophically injured victims of car accidents.
Are we going to draw up an amendment that says every speeding ticket on highways or whatever else, otherwise they should go to the Spinal Injury Trust Fund too?
Chairman Rules are out on the same page here, and I hope that many of you are. For heaven's sakes, let's vote to protect the school zones. We're limiting the school zones for kids.
House Bill 294 with the Smith Amendment now goes back to the House for its approval. Citizens in support of the Animal Fighting Act gathered on the Capitol steps this morning, calling for Representative David Ralston to push the bill out of committee so it can be voted on before legislators in this session. Supporters of the bill say this is necessary to reduce illegal activity with animal fighting and to help law enforcement build stronger cases against those involved in dog fighting.
This is a felony. There are other major crimes that go along with this, like gambling, illegal drugs, illegal guns. There are children at these dog fights. Other crimes arise from this, like the mauling of children. This is why Senator Rogers first proposed this bill. So this is a major crime bill. It's about felonies. That is why we think it should be passed. And Georgia, according to the United States Humane Society, is the worst dog-fighting state, and we have one of the weakest laws.
Representative Ralston declined to be interviewed regarding the bill, and Senator Chip Rogers, the bill's sponsor, says Senate Bill 229 will be introduced in the next session.
The Senate today failed to give a required two-thirds vote to pass a sales tax amendment to the state constitution. The substitute to House Resolution 773 would have allowed county school districts that contain independent school districts to impose special local option sales taxes on a countywide basis, even without the participation of the independent school district. Proponents said that would mean a fair distribution of tax proceeds. Opponents said independent schools would suffer, and everyone, for some reason, used canine comparisons. First, we unleashed Senator Don Balfour, who favored the measure.
If you're from a county where you only have county schools, you probably don't have a dog in this fight. If you're from a county that has city schools and county schools, you need to do some math in deciding this and not just listen to who has the largest bark.
What is that? That is the big dog chasing the little dog. The senator before me was the little big dog. He was the German Shepherd. And believe it or not, I'm the Chihuahua. And the big dog's chasing the little dog. And the big dog are the county school systems. And the little dogs, unfortunately, are the municipal school systems.
That big German Shepherd is chasing that Chihuahua, sure he is. And for good reason. That little yappy Chihuahua deserves it. And let me tell you why. That big German Shepherd was given some food by his master, the state, his owner. He got his equal share of food, and that little yappy Chihuahua came in and tried to steal some of that food. He wanted more than his share, and that's what this is all about.
The vote on the resolution was 30 to 21, failing to get the required 38 votes a constitutional amendment needs to pass the Senate.
Well, in the midst of the General Assembly budget impasse, the House passed a bill this morning regulating halal foods, those eaten under Islamic dietary laws. However, the House version of Senate Bill 96 removes any reference to halal labeling, replacing it with the provisions of House Bill 1380, allowing small home-based food service businesses to operate without licenses. Representative Jerry Keene said the committee substitute was presented in honor of Powder Springs fried pie maker Willie Watts, whose $100 per week business was shut down last week by the State Department of Agriculture.
Representative Tom Graves came to me and found a vehicle that was pending and a Senate bill over here, which we were able to rework the language a little bit to correct this problem. Miss Willie Watts has come down here this morning, the lady who has been the victim of this. She's up there in the gallery with her daughter. Would y'all welcome Miss Watts here this morning from Powder Springs? I was able to buy for Miss Watts a tray of fried pies this morning, which I'm going to resell at a premium, because I've tasted them, and believe you, they are worth the money.
Representative Keene sold 12 pies for about $300. All proceeds were given to Mrs. Watts. The House adopted Senate Bill 96 without opposition. The changes made in committee send that measure back to the Senate.
On the next to the last day of the legislative session, several key pieces of legislation have passed or are dead for this year. Here's our latest list. The supplemental budget, House Bill 1026, was passed by the House and Senate in February. A conference committee report was adopted earlier this month. The amended appropriations bill awaits Governor Perdue's signature. In business-related bills, HB 970, temporarily reducing the state sales tax on liquid propane and natural gas, passed the House and Senate and was signed by the governor in January. House Bill 1182, a sales and use tax exemption aimed at luring the NASCAR Hall of Fame to Atlanta, passed both the House and Senate. The governor has yet to sign it. The NASCAR Hall of Fame, meanwhile, went to Charlotte. Education legislation includes Senate Bill 390, the governor's mandate that 65% of education funds be spent in the classroom. That measure cleared the House and Senate and is yet to be signed into law by the governor. The governor's proposed Hope Chest Amendment to the state constitution, preserving lottery funds for Hope scholarships in pre-K, needed a 2/3 vote and failed to get that in the Senate or House. House Bill 1219, the back-to-school sales tax holiday, passed the House and Senate and is waiting for the governor's signature. Environmental measures include HB 1107, providing a land conservation tax credit. That bill also awaits the governor's signature after passing both houses of the General Assembly. Redistricting bills include those redrawing 4 House districts and 3 Senate districts. Both those bills passed both houses, and both were signed by Governor Perdue the first day of March. Social issues include House Bill 1080, a state income tax credit for child and dependent care. The bill has passed the House and Senate. The governor hasn't signed it yet. H.R. 1345 failed to get a 2/3 vote in the House. That's another of the governor's proposed constitutional amendments. It would have allowed state money to go to faith-based groups to provide social services. Senate Bill 79 did pass. It would allow public schools to offer courses that teach the Bible as history and literature, and the Bible would be used as the textbook. After passing both houses, the bill only needs the governor's signature to become law. And SB 84, requiring voters to have specific picture IDs, passed the House and Senate and was signed by the governor in January. And that is our Day 39 scorecard.
And finally this evening, the George Walton Academy Band brought its sounds to the Capitol today. Here's some highlights from their performance.
And that was about the only harmony at the Capitol today. Lawmakers will not be seen tomorrow night because the Georgia General Assembly will be in recess. We'll return for the final legislative day on Thursday night at 7 p.m. If you've missed any part of this Lawmakers broadcast, tune in tomorrow morning when Lawmakers repeats at 5:30 a.m. Now stay tuned for Wild Chronicles. That's coming up next here on GPB.
And that's our broadcast for this, the 39th legislative day of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Nwandi Lawson.
And I'm Gerald Bryant. Thanks for joining us. Have a great evening.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.